If slow, emotional stories about grief and second chances touch your heart, please like this video and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapters on this channel. The first snow came quietly, as if it didn't want to wake the dead. Flakes drifted down over the hilltop cemetery, settling on stone and iron, softening edges that were usually hard and unforgiving. The town below was just a blur of yellow lights and distant roads. Up here by Dumoyen, there were only names, dates, flowers gone brittle in the cold. Eva Hart pulled her daughter closer. Rosie's wool hat had slipped sideways. A strand of hair stuck to her cheek where hot chocolate had dried. "Hold still," Eva murmured. She straightened the hat, wiped the stain, then let her hand rest a moment on the girl's small, warm face. They stood in front of a simple gray headstone. Snow was already gathering along the top edge, clinging to the carved letters. Claire Cole, 1986-2018. You were the light in the storm. Rosie sounded out the letters slowly in her head. She could read most words now, but she didn't say them out loud. She was watching her mother instead. "Is she cold?" Rosie asked finally, gaze fixed on the stone. When the snow falls on her name like that, Eva smiled without showing teeth. "No," she said. "She's not cold anymore." The wind pressed against her coat. It smelled like metal and distant smoke. It smelled like the night everything had gone wrong and then, somehow, gone right. 7 winters ago, a highway bridge outside town. Railings rimed with ice. Her fingers numb on the metal, her shoes slick. Cars passing below, lights streaking through the dark. Her thoughts running in a tight, desperate circle. It had felt very simple in that moment. Step over, fall, silence. Then a car had pulled off onto the shoulder. A door had slammed. Footsteps had crunched on the snow behind her. "Hey," a woman's voice had said. No siren, no shouting, just warm, tired patience. "It's freezing up here." They had sat on the pavement together, back against the rail, legs dangling over the drop. The woman hadn't asked for details. She hadn't tried to talk Eva out of anything with slogans and empty phrases. She had said her name was Claire. She'd said she volunteered on a crisis line, that sometimes calls felt too far away, that sometimes you had to go yourself. "Tonight," Claire had said softly, watching the traffic, "we don't have to figure out the rest of your life. We just have to get through the night." Later, there had been strangers in uniforms, a hospital, papers to sign, leaflets Eva never read. But what had stayed was Claire's presence, the way she hadn't looked disgusted or afraid, the way she'd made a stranger on a bridge feel like a person again. A week after that, Eva had seen the photo in the paper, a crash on a winter road, a car spun out on black ice, one woman dead, Claire Cole. Eva hadn't known where to put that information. She hadn't gone to the funeral. She had not been invited, and she had been too full of shame to appear uninvited. But she found the grave. Every year after, when the first snow fell, she came back. She brought whatever thank you she could carry and stood in front of the stone and asked a question she never quite voiced. "Am I using the time you gave me well enough?" Now Rosie crouched in the snow, bouncing slightly on the balls of her feet to keep warm. "Can she see us?" Rosie asked Miss Claire. "Maybe," Eva said. "If she can, she's probably laughing at how red my nose is." Rosie giggled. The sound floated up between stones and trees, thin and bright. Eva knelt and placed a small glass jar at the base of the headstone. Inside, pressed to the glass, was a dried sprig of lavender. Taped around it was a drawing done in thick marker, 3 stick figures under a yellow circle, one much smaller than the other 2. "She wanted you to have it again," Eva said quietly. "She did another one this year." The first snow of the season was always the beginning and the warning. It meant winter was truly here. It meant fuel bills. It meant icy sidewalks and the old car protesting every start. It meant her landlord's letter was sitting in her coat pocket, folded and refolded until the paper was going soft. "Increase in rent. I'm sorry, Ava, but costs are going up for everyone. End of the month. No exceptions." Eva brushed snow from the top of the stone and stood. "Say goodbye, Bug." she said. But, Miss Claire, Rosie whispered, thank you for my mommy. On their way back along the cemetery path, they weren't alone. A man stood by a row of older graves beneath a bare tree. Snow was gathering on his shoulders, on the dark wool of his coat, on the lines of his face. He turned as they came closer. Up close, he looked like someone who had once been handsome in a careless way, and then life had carved carefulness into him. There was silver at his temples. His eyes were pale, sharp, and tired all at once. He stepped aside to let them pass. Early to be out here, he said, voice low. First snow and all. It felt right, Eva replied, before the hill gets crowded. She regretted the words as soon as she said them. This was a cemetery, that's not a festival. Crowded meant funerals. The man followed her gaze back to Claire Stone. You knew her, he asked. Not really, Eva said, the same half-truth she always used. She helped me once, a long time ago. Something flickered in his expression, recognition of the pattern, not of her. She helped a lot of people, Bo, he said, even when it wasn't safe. Rosie peeked from behind Eva's coat. Do you come here every year too, she asked. He almost smiled. Pretty much. He said, my name's Daniel. Like the tiger in the cartoon, Rosie said, satisfied. Rosie, Eva said softly, we should go. The roads will get worse. She looked back at him. I'm Eva, she said. This is Rosie. He nodded once, the motion almost formal. Daniel Cole, he said. The last name hit like a small, soft blow. Eva already knew it from the stone, from the obituary. Hearing it from his own mouth made it heavier. I'm sorry for your loss, she said. The phrase felt thin against so much time and grief, but it was all she had. Thank you, he answered. Wind moved through the trees. Snow fell between them, making the space feel both wide and strangely intimate. Drive safe, he said. We walk, Eva replied, but we'll manage. She gave him a quick, awkward smile, then took Rosie's hand and headed down the hill, toward the road, toward the car that coughed when it was too cold. Behind them, Daniel turned back to the headstone with his wife's name on it. You're still sending me projects, aren't you, he murmured. His breath clouded in the air, then disappeared. The eviction came faster than she'd hoped and exactly when she'd feared. The landlord stood in the doorway of the small apartment, hat in his hands, eyes aimed somewhere near her shoulder instead of at her face. I've held off as long as I could, he said. I like you, Eva. You know that. You're always on time. You keep the place clean. But the numbers? I understand, she said. You've said that part already. Rosie sat on the floor behind her, coloring in a bent, secondhand workbook, humming to herself. Her backpack leaned against the wall, patched at the bottom where the fabric had worn through. You can stay till the end of the month, he said. After that, I need the place back. End of the month was 3 days away. She smiled, because it was easier than crying. We'll be gone before then, she said. That night, she packed the car. Clothes in bags, dishes in boxes. Rosie's favorite books in a plastic crate between the front seats. A folded blanket for the back. Is this like camping? Rosie asked, more excited than afraid. Kind of, Eva said. A very small cabin, on wheels. They drove up the hill as the snow started again. Streetlights blazed halos in the swirling air. She parked near the edge of the cemetery, where the road wasn't too steep and no one was likely to knock on the window and ask questions. She turned the engine off. Silence fell heavy around them, broken only by the ticking of hot metal cooling. Rosie curled up in the back seat, buried under 2 blankets in her puffy coat, clutching a stuffed rabbit whose fur had gone thin. Adventure sleepover, Eva said, just for tonight. Will it be warm, Rosie asked. Already half asleep. I'll keep us warm, Eva said. When Rosie's breathing slowed, Eva leaned back in the driver's seat and watched her own breath fog the windshield. The cold crept in through the glass and metal, into her bones. She thought of another winter night, a bridge railing, a stranger's coat around her shoulders, a voice saying just the night, like a spell against the dark. Headlights flashed past on the road below. For a moment she imagined turning the key, rolling down the hill. driving along until the gas ran out. She didn't start the engine. There were only so many miles left in the tank. The next headlights did not pass. They slowed. They swept across the cemetery wall, over the bare trees, and came to rest behind her car. Eva's hand went automatically to the door lock, as if that would really help. A shadow approached the driver's side window. There was a knock, knuckles against glass. Not loud, but insistently present. Eva, his voice was muffled but unmistakable. She hesitated, then turned the key just enough to lower the window an inch. A knife of cold air sliced in. Daniel, she said. He stood in the snow with no hat, his hair and shoulders dusted white. Behind him, his dark sedan idled, breath steaming from the exhaust. I saw the car, he said. From the main road, I thought it looked familiar. He leaned, peering inside. His gaze landed on the blanket-covered shape in the back seat. On the way, Rosie's hand had slipped out, fingers pale and limp in the cold. You're staying here, he asked. Just for tonight, Eva said quickly. It's not. We're fine. He took that in, his eyes closed briefly, as if against a wave of old, familiar pain. It's below freezing, he said. You're not fine. I've slept in worse, she replied. You shouldn't have to, he said. He straightened, shoving his hands deeper into his coat pockets. I have a guest house, he said. It's empty. It has heat, real beds, a roof that doesn't leak. You and your daughter can stay there. For a while. No, she said instantly. The word jumped out on reflex. I can't. I don't take handouts. He looked at her, snow collecting in his eyebrows. This isn't a handout, he said. It's a waste of space if no one uses it. And a child shouldn't sleep in a car in a storm when there's an empty bed 2 miles away. His voice was calm, but there was something underneath. Not pity, something harder. A memory of another night he hadn't been able to stop. I don't know you, she said. You know I come to the same grave, he answered. I know you bring lavender and drawings. We live in the same small town. That's more than strangers. Eva. She tasted blood where she'd bitten the inside of her cheek. Rosie coughed in her sleep. Eva looked back at her daughter, then at the falling snow, then at the man outside the car who had loved the woman who had once kept her from jumping. Just for a little while, she said. He nodded. Just for a little while, he agreed. The Cole property sat at the edge of town, where houses thinned and trees thickened. The main house was a broad, old structure with a wraparound porch and windows that glowed like warm eyes in the night. Behind it, past a line of bare oaks and a low stone wall, stood the guest house. It was smaller, a cottage set into the slope, with a porch of its own and a swing that moved slightly in the wind. Eva's boots squeaked on the snow-dusted steps as she followed Daniel up. Rosie trudged beside her. Holding Maple's leash, Daniel's golden retriever had bounded out of the dark as soon as they arrived, tail high, acting as if the entire situation were a surprise party. Inside, the guest house smelled faintly of cedar and old coffee. There was a living room with a well-worn couch, a small fireplace, a kitchen with a narrow table, down a short hallway, a bedroom with 2 twin beds, quilts folded neatly at the foot of each. Rosie ran straight to the nearest bed and flopped down. She stared up and, Look, she said, wonder in her voice. Stars. Tiny glow-in-the-dark constellations dotted the ceiling. They were faded, but still there. She used to lie there and make up stories about them, Daniel said quietly from the doorway. Claire, Eva asked. He nodded. She liked the idea that even when things looked dark, the light was still there. You just had to wait for your eyes to adjust. Eva swallowed. We'll take good care of it, she said. He glanced around the small space. A pillow slightly crooked, a chair pulled half an inch away from the table. It's been empty too long, he replied. It'll be good for it to be lived in again. He handed her a spare key. There's food in the fridge, he said. Not much, but enough for breakfast. Come up to the main house in the morning. We'll figure things out then. She hesitated. Why are you doing this? She asked. Really? He looked straight at her, his eyes suddenly sharper. Because someone once sat with my wife on a bridge in the middle of a storm, he said, and I've been trying to make sense of that choice ever since. If I walk past a car with a child sleeping in the back and do nothing, then I've learned nothing from losing her. The words landed with a soft, heavy thud. I don't want to be another person who looked away, he added, more quietly. Rosie snored softly on the bed, already half gone. Thank you, Eva said. The words were small, but they were real. Good night, he said. He stepped back out into the cold, closing the door gently behind him. Eva stood for a moment in the quiet house, listening to the tick of the heater, the distant bark of maple, the slow settling of the world into something almost safe. Then she went to tuck her daughter in and lay down on the other bed, staring up at the faint, glowing stars. She found the foundation by accident. It was on a file folder left on the kitchen counter of the guest house the next morning, next to a bag of groceries someone had dropped off while she and Rosie were still asleep. Claire Hope Foundation Winter Relief Program. The logo was a simple lantern, a small flame burning inside. She knew that logo. She had seen it on envelopes over the years, on letters that had arrived when shelves were empty and bills were stacked, on small rental grants that had kept them from freezing in previous winters, on documents that said therapy paid in full when she'd had no idea how she was going to cover it. She had never known who sat behind that logo. The address had just been a P.O. box. Emails had gone to info@clairehope.org. It had always felt distant, institutional, faceless. She opened the folder. Inside was a letter on thick paper. It listed local partners, community projects. At the bottom, in clean by precise font, Director Daniel Cole. Her hand tightened on the edge of the page until the paper bent. Of course it was his name, his foundation, Claire's name in the title, his effort behind it, his grief turned into something that moved quietly through the town. He had been in her life for years without knowing it, sending funds, approving grants, signing forms. Her file had been one among many, a case number, a summary written by a social worker, single mother, history of depression, one child, recommendation approved. He might not have read her name, or he might have. She couldn't know. What she did know was that the man who'd stood in the snow next to his wife's grave had also been the unseen hand making sure Rosie's preschool didn't call to say no more when she missed a payment. Now he had placed a key in her palm. Eva closed the folder and set it down gently, as if it were something fragile. She felt suddenly surrounded by kindness, by history, by debt she had never agreed to, but had accepted all the same. When she stepped up to the main house later, Rosie skipping ahead with Maple, there was a weight in her chest that wasn't just guilt, it was complexity. It was the knowledge that her life was tied to his, whether either of them wanted it or not. Life on the hill settled into a quiet rhythm. In the mornings, Eva walked Rosie down the drive to the school bus stop at the main road. The snowbanks rose on either side like frozen waves. Their breaths hung in the air in short bursts. Rosie talked about spelling tests and cafeteria pizza, and a girl named Mia who braided everyone's hair too tight. Her world stretched beyond survival in a way Eva's never had at that age. In the afternoons, Eva split herself in two. Part of her still belonged to the Lakeview Cafe in town. The clatter of dishes, the smell of coffee and grilled cheese, the regulars who always sat in the same booths. She needed those tips, and the rest of her time, Daniel asked if she would help at the foundation. It's temporary, he said, hands wrapped around a mug at the kitchen table. We got more winter applications than usual. I'm drowning in paper. You've been on the other side of this. You know what it feels like to fill out these forms. You want me to pick who gets help, she asked. I want you to help make sure the stories don't blur together, he said. Sometimes I forget there are faces behind the words. She thought of the stack of letters that had arrived over the years. The relief when they did. The panic when they didn't. Okay, she said, but I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. I'm counting on that, he replied. The foundation office was a room off the main hall, with a large wooden desk, filing cabinets, and a wall of photographs. Claire's smile appeared in many of them by a lake lined with lanterns, in a community center, In a modest office with mismatched chairs, Eva sat at the corner of the desk, reading applications. A man whose furnace had broken, a teenager asking for bus money to reach a therapist across town, a mother with 3 kids and an electricity bill twice her income. Sometimes the words blurred and she had to look up. Focus on the photograph of Claire standing with a group of volunteers, arms spread wide, as if pulling them all into some invisible embrace. "Don't look at me like I have the answers," she muttered under her breath. "I think she'd say you're doing fine," came Daniel's voice from the doorway. She looked up, caught. "Oh, I'm just reading," she said. "Nobody's life is in my hands." "That's not nothing," he said. "Reading is where everything starts." He moved closer, dropping a new folder on the desk. "Town council," he said. "They want us to sponsor the Winter Light Festival again." She remembered the first one. She had watched it from far away, on a hill, too raw to join. Lanterns floating on the lake. Names were out over crackling speakers. The town trying to make poetry out of pain. "I thought they stopped," she said. "They did," he replied. "After Claire. I couldn't stand seeing her name on banners." Nora walked away from it all. The council let it go. "And now," she asked, "now they think enough time has passed," he said. "Enough for people to miss it. Enough for it to feel like tradition instead of memorial." He said tradition like it tasted wrong. "What do you think?" she asked. His jaw tightened. "I think it was her idea," he said. "Her design, her stubbornness. I think she wanted it to outlive her. And I also think every time I picture her face on a lantern now, I want to tear it down." He exhaled, long and slow. "I said I'd meet with them," he added. "Hear them out. They asked if the foundation had anyone who could help with visuals, posters, lantern designs. I said maybe." He looked at her, an almost question in his eyes. "I make decent stick figures," she said. "You make faces feel like people," he answered. "It's not the same thing." She shrugged, trying not to let the warmth of the compliment show. "I can come to the meeting," she said. "Take notes. See if it feels wrong." "Thank you," he said. That night, the power went out. It started with a flicker, the overhead light dimming, flaring, then snapping off. The hum of the refrigerator stopped. The heater sighed and went quiet. Mom Rosie called from the living room of the guest house. "Did the house die?" "It's just the electricity," Eva said. "Stay where you are." She was standing at the sink, hands wet. Cold rushed in immediately, as if it had been waiting. A knock came at the door. Daniel stood outside with a flashlight and a box of candles. "Generators being serviced," he said. "Perfect timing. Do you mind if we share a little old-fashioned gloom?" He set the candles on the table and began placing them in mugs and jars. His movements were sure, practiced. Eva struck a match. The flame flared, then calmed. One by one, small islands of light appeared around the room. The shadows pulled in close but lost their sharpness. Rosie sat cross-legged on the floor, blanket around her shoulders, eyes wide. "It's like a campfire," she said. "No marshmallows," Ava replied, "but close." Daniel sank into the armchair by the fireplace. Maple sprawled under his feet, happy to claim any space that felt like the center of things. For a while, no one spoke. Wind hissed against the windows. Tree branches scratched faintly. The wall clock ticked loud enough to be a character in the room. Eva leaned back against the couch, legs stretched out, candlelight flickering across her face. "Silence is loud," Daniel said quietly. "It's not silence," she answered. "It's just everything we usually can't hear under all the noise." He looked at her, and in the uneven light she saw how tired he really was. "Did you ever meet her?" he asked. "Claire, properly." Eva's throat tightened. "Once," she said, "not properly. We didn't exchange life stories. We just shared a night." He nodded, eyes on the flame in front of him. "I met her in college," he said. "She was the only one in the room who argued with the professor and then stayed behind to ask how his day was." A small smile touched his mouth. "I used to tell her she didn't have to save everyone. He said that it was okay to be selfish sometimes, to come home instead of going back out into the storm. He swallowed. The night she died, he continued, she got a call from someone on the crisis line who hung up before saying much. She grabbed her keys anyway. I told her the roads were too bad. She said, "What if they don't call back?" and kissed my cheek and left. The candle between them bent as a draft slipped under the door. They told me it was black ice. He said that it happened fast, that she probably didn't feel much. He stared at his hands. I have spent 7 winters imagining every version of that drive, he whispered. Every minute I didn't see. Daniel, Eva said softly. He shook his head once. I'm not saying this to make you feel sorry for me, he said. Sometimes it helps to say it out loud to someone who isn't trapped in the same memory. The room held its breath. I'm glad she was there with you, he added, so quietly she almost didn't hear. Eva stared at the candle's small, steady flame. So am I, she said, even if everything after was what it was. They let the silence return then, not empty, but shared. The town council meeting for the Winter Light Festival was held in a community hall that looked like every community hall everywhere. Beige walls, folding chairs, a stage with a microphone that squealed when tapped. Posters from events long past still hung crooked in the corners. Bake sale, blood drive, craft fair. A hand-painted sign near the front read, Winter Light Festival bringing hope back to the lakes. Eva sat halfway back, notebook in her lap, pen poised. Daniel sat next to her, shoulders tight beneath his coat. The chair beside him was empty. Until it wasn't. A woman slid into it with the quiet force of someone who had made a decision and was not backing down. She had dark hair pulled into a knot at the nape of her neck, sharp cheekbones, and eyes that looked like they had seen too much and trusted too little. Nora, Daniel said. Don't worry, she replied. I'm not here to break up your little light show. I just want to hear how they're planning to use my sister this time. Her voice was calm, but every syllable had an edge. Eva knew who she was before Daniel said it. The bones around her eyes, the mouth, the way her face shifted when someone said sister. Eva, this is Nora Hale, Daniel said, Claire's younger sister. Nora turned, giving Eva a quick, assessing look. So you're Eva, she said. Yes, Eva managed. It's nice to meet you. I'll decide that later, Nora replied. A man in a plaid shirt marched up to the microphone and launched into the speech. He talked about community, about remembrance, about how the Winter Light Festival had once brought everyone together. He clicked through old photos projected onto a wrinkled screen, lanterns floating on the lake, couples holding hands, children with faces half lit by candle glow. And we all remember, he said brightly, who gave us this tradition in the first place. Claire Cole and her sister, Nora. Heads turned. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Nora's jaw clenched. She hated that photo, Nora whispered as Claire's face filled the screen. Said she looked like a drowned raccoon. In the picture, Claire stood in a winter coat, hair blown wild by the wind, cheeks flushed, grinning as if the cold meant nothing. Behind her, the lake was dotted with points of light. She loved this, Daniel said, almost to himself. She loved the people. Nora corrected. The festival was just an excuse. After the presentation, the council opened the floor. We're thrilled the Claire Hope Foundation is considering the sponsorship again. The man in plaid said, with your support, we can make this bigger than ever. Nora stood. If it becomes bigger than the people it's supposed to be for, she said, you'll do it without our name. All eyes swung to her. I don't want to see my sister's face on mugs, she went on, or her story on brochures meant to make donors feel good about themselves. If this is a place for real grief and real hope, fine. If it turns into a circus, I will tear your banners down with my own hands. The room shifted around her anger. The man at the microphone stammered something about intentions. Eva watched Daniel's profile. He wasn't smiling, but there was a strange, respect there. On the drive back to the hill, the sky a low gray lid, he glanced at Eva. Will you still help? He asked. With the designs. If I can make it less of a circus and more of a vigil, she said. Then yes. He nodded once. Then we'll do it, he said. Claire's office had been closed for years. The door at the end of the hall stayed shut most days, as if the space behind it were still occupied by someone who might walk back in at any moment. When Daniel handed her the key, his fingers lingered on it for a beat longer than necessary. There are old festival sketches in there, he said. Notes? Use whatever you need. Just put things back the way you found them. Or better. The smell hit her first when she opened the door. Paper. Dust. A faint undercurrent of dried flowers. The room was small but full. Shelves lined the walls, crammed with books on counseling, grief, community work, binders with labels like crisis training and outreach plans, jars of dried lavender, rosemary, something she couldn't name. A corkboard held photographs from previous festivals, lanterns on water, names written in careful handwriting on paper bags, people standing with candles, faces soft and complicated. The desk under the window was still arranged as if someone had just stepped out. A mug with a ring of tea at the bottom, a pen resting on a notebook, a lamp with a crooked shade. Eva ran her fingers lightly along the edge of the desk, then sat down and started in on the piles. Most of it was practical. Vendor lists, volunteer sign-up sheets, budget breakdowns with Claire's neat, looping handwriting in the margins. Near the back of a drawer, she found a spiral-bound sketchbook. It had no label on the cover, just a paint stain shaped like a small, abstract bird. Inside, the first pages were full of lanterns. Different shapes, different patterns. Words written around them: stay, hope, together. Then the drawings changed. A girl appeared on the page. Sometimes she sat on a guardrail, knees pulled up, hair tangled around her face. Sometimes she stood by the edge of a bridge, arms wrapped tight around herself. Sometimes she was just a profile, eyes huge and hollow. Under one sketch, Claire had written, "She looks like she's already halfway gone, but the light is still there, just very small." Eva's heart began pounding. She turned another page. This one had more words than lines. "I don't know her name. She wouldn't tell me. She said it didn't matter because she wasn't going to be around tomorrow." I wanted to tell her that names are anchors, that even if you feel like you're slipping away, your name is the part that can be called back. I have never been so afraid for someone I didn't know. Eva's fingers trembled. She turned another page, more slowly this time. If you read this someday, if somehow these pages end up in your hands, I want you to know this. You did not ruin my life. You did not take me away from anyone. If I am not here, it is because roads are slippery and cars are fragile, and I am more stubborn than is reasonable. You saved something in yourself that night, and in me, and in him, though he doesn't know it yet. The room seemed to tilt. She could see it all at once. The bridge, the cold, Claire's face, the headlights on snow. Miss Claire, Claire Cole, the name on the grave, the woman whose husband had given her a bed. It had all been there, but she hadn't let herself connect the final thread. She didn't hear the footsteps in the hallway, or the way the floorboard creaked in the doorway. "Be careful with that," a voice said. Eva looked up. Nora stood there, one hand on the doorframe. Her eyes were fixed on the open page. I was looking for festival notes." Eva stammered up. "I didn't know this was for you," Nora finished. She stepped into the room, boots whispering on the floor. "She drew you for weeks," Nora said. "Our fridge looked like a crime board. All the same girl from different angles." She pointed at the sketch. "I recognized you the first time I saw you at the cemetery," she said. "Did you really think you were invisible?" I thought, Ava swallowed. "I thought it would be easier for everyone if I stayed far away." "For everyone or for you?" Nora asked. Eva didn't answer. Nora moved closer. Her face was pale, eyes dark and bright. "You know what night she died?" Nora said. "You know where she was coming from?" "Yes," Ava whispered. "She drove out in a storm because someone was standing on a bridge." Nora said, she hit ice on the way back. She never made it home. She stepped even closer, until Eva could see the tiny scar on her chin. "You are the reason she was on that road," Nora said. "You are the reason my sister's car went into a ditch instead of her pulling into this driveway." The words were knives. They slid into places that were already raw. "I have told myself that every day," Eva said. Her voice shook. "You're not saying anything I haven't screamed at myself." Nora's mouth tightened. "And now," she said, "you live in her guest house. You work at her foundation. You are about to put your designs on her festival. Do you not see why that makes me want to tear the whole hill down?" Eva's hand, still resting on the sketchbook, curled into a fist. "I didn't know it was her," she said. "Not at first. I knew a woman named Claire saved me. I knew a woman named Claire Cole died. I couldn't make myself come here and say, 'Hi, I'm the one she thought was worth it.' I thought the kindest thing I could do was vanish." Nora's eyes flashed. Kindness for who, she asked? For us, or for the part of you that didn't want to stand in front of a family and see what you'd cost them? There was no good answer. A soft sound came from the doorway. Daniel stood there. His face was drawn, lips pressed thin. His gaze moved from the sketchbook to Nora to Eva, taking in the scene in one long, pained sweep. "Nora," he said quietly, "enough." "Is it?" She shot back. She should hear it. From someone who knew her longer than a few hours on a bridge. He stepped into the room. "This is not just about her," he said. "You've been angry at Claire for years because she went out instead of staying home, because she made choices you never understood." "Of course I don't understand," Nora said. "Normal people don't drive into blizzards for strangers." "She would do it again," Daniel said. "You know that. That's what terrifies me," Nora whispered. He looked at Eva. "So it was you," he said, voice quiet but steady. "On the bridge." Eva met his eyes. There was nowhere to hide. "Yes," she said. He inhaled as if punched. "I thought about you as a shadow," he said slowly. "The girl she didn't name. The reason she left. The ghost between us and our anger." He looked down at the page again, at Claire's handwriting. "She wrote about you," he said. "She wanted you to know something I haven't had the courage to read out loud until now." He closed the book. "She made that choice," he said. "To go, to drive, to sit with you. The storm, the road, the lack of guardrails, that's what killed her. Not you standing on a bridge." He turned to Nora. "If you need to blame someone, blame me," he said. "I begged her to come home. I didn't follow her. I said, 'Be careful,' instead of 'turn around.' I have been punishing myself for surviving that night. I am done punishing other people for the same thing." Nora's eyes filled, but she didn't let the tears fall. "You're both very noble," she said. "It must be nice." She spun on her heel and walked out. The room felt emptier without her anger filling it. Eva stood carefully, closing the sketchbook as if it might bite. "I should go," she said. "I shouldn't be here. In this house, in her space." Daniel shook his head. "Leaving won't change what already happened," he said. "But I know you. You'll go anyway." She stared at him. "You don't," she said. "You don't know me. I know the look of someone who's convinced everyone would be better off if they disappeared," he replied. "It's in a lot of the files we read." The sentence sat between them, heavy and intimate. "Do what you have to," he said, voice softer. "But don't do it because you think it pays some debt." That night, Eva wrote a letter. At the kitchen table in the guest house, with Rosie asleep in the next room, she wrote until her hand cramped. She wrote about the bridge, about the nights afterward, about the foundation's letters, about Laura, the social worker who had helped her fill out the first application, about thinking she'd honor Claire more by staying away than by risking their pain. In the end, she kept it simple. "Thank you for the roof and for the work. Thank you for seeing us as more than a file. But I cannot stay here and watch her family bleed when I walk into a room. I am grateful for every day I got that she did not. I will try to make them worth the calm." She weighed the letter down with a mug on the counter. Before dawn, she packed the bags again. Rosie woke to the rustle of zippers. "Are we moving?" she mumbled. "Just down the hill," Ava said. We'll find something. We always do. She left the key to the guest house next to the letter. The car started on the second try. Snow hissed under the tires as they rolled away from the house with the glowing windows and the guest house with the faint stars on the ceiling. Eva didn't look back. The flyer for the Winter Light Festival was taped crooked on the grocery store bulletin board. Winter Light Festival returns, hosted by the Claire Hope Foundation speakers Daniel Cole and Nora Hale. There was a small lantern drawn in the corner in blue ink. Someone had added a heart next to Claire's name. Eva read it twice, stomach tightening. She hadn't been planning to come back up the hill unless forced. The new apartment was smaller, louder, down by the highway. The walls were thin, but the rent was something she could just manage with 2 jobs and no extra breathing. Rosie tugged at her sleeve. "Can we go?" she asked. "To the lights. My teacher said it's very pretty." Pretty, Eva thought. That word for something built on bones. "It might be crowded," she said. "That's okay," Rosie replied. "Lights are better with people. Otherwise, you just feel like a moth." Eva almost laughed. "We'll see," she said. On the night of the festival, the town square was transformed. Lanterns hung from wires strung between lampposts. Candles lined the low walls. The fountain in the center had been turned off, its basin filled with more lanterns, glass cases reflecting flame. Snow fell in slow, lazy spirals, catching the light as it descended. People gathered in thick coats, breath smoking, mittens wrapped around paper cups. Some carried photographs. Some held folded slips of orange paper. Some stood with their hands in their pockets, as if unsure why they'd come. Eva and Rosie slipped in at the edge of the crowd. "Nobody can see us," Rosie said, satisfied. "We're like ninjas, very sparkly ninjas," Eva said, brushing a snowflake from her daughter's lashes. A temporary stage had been set up at one end of the square. 2 lanterns hung on either side of the microphone, larger than the rest, with Claire written on one and a blank tag on the other. Daniel stood at the back of the stage, hat off, hair damp with melting snow. He scanned the crowd once, eyes passing over faces in jackets and hats, then steadied on the lanterns. Nora stood beside him. She wore no hat, her dark hair already dusted white, shoulders squared like someone stepping into a courtroom. A council member said a few words first about community, darkness, light. His voice came and went for Eva, the words blending with the sound of snow under shifting boots. Then he stepped back and, "Daniel," he said, "would you like to speak?" Daniel approached the microphone. For a moment, he said nothing, just looked at the people in front of him, the lanterns overhead, the snow. "Thank you for coming," he said at last. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. "This festival was my wife's idea," he said. Claire believed that winter was when people needed proof that light still existed. She used to say that if you put enough candles together, even the most stubborn darkness had to move aside. A ripple went through the crowd. Some people smiled. Some wiped their noses. "For a while after she died," he went on, "I thought the right way to honor her was to keep everything exactly as it was. Not touch her office, not say her name out loud too often, not bring back the festival. I was afraid that changing anything would be a betrayal." He took a breath. "I was also angry," he said, "angry at the storm, at the road, at the work she loved so much, at myself, at the person she went out to help that night." Eva felt Rosie's hand tighten around her fingers. She stood very still. "I carried that anger like a lantern with no light in it," he said, "heavy and useless. It didn't protect me. It didn't bring her back. It just kept me from seeing the people still here." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper, edges worn. "Claire wrote this months before she died," he said, Chua. "She wrote lists to herself, notes, plans. I found this one day hiding in a stack. I wasn't ready to read it then. I am now." He unfolded the paper with careful fingers. "If I don't make it back some night," he read, "I need you to know it was never because I loved you less than the work. It will be because I loved you and the people I sit with in the dark in the same stubborn way. Enough to go where I think I'm needed, even when it's stupid. A few people laughed softly through their tears. It sounded like her, even to those who hadn't known her well. If the girl on the bridge ever sees this, he read, tell her she does not owe me a life. She owes herself one. Tell her I saw the part of her that wanted to stay. Tell her I was just there to point at it when she couldn't see it. Eva's vision blurred. Rosie leaned against her side. And if you ever meet someone whose eyes carry that same small, stubborn light, Daniel continued, do not let my memory stop your hand from reaching for theirs. I do not want to be a wall between you and the living. I want to be a bridge, even if I'm not there to walk across it with you. He let the paper fall to his side. For 7 winters, he said, I have been letting the moment of her death define everything. Tonight, I am choosing something else. Not because it hurts less, but because she deserves better than being frozen in the worst thing that ever happened to us. He glanced at Nora. She built this festival with her sister. He said, Nora walked away from it when it became too painful. She is here now anyway. That is its own kind of courage. Nora stepped forward. Her voice, when she spoke, was not sharp. It was rough and honest. I have been very angry, she said, at Claire, at Daniel, at the world, at every stranger who ever got a piece of the love I thought belonged to us. She gestured to the lanterns. I still don't want my sister's face on souvenirs. She said, I don't want people to use her story as a reason to feel good about ignoring their neighbors the rest of the year. She took a breath, but I also know she would be furious if we let this night die with her. She wanted this to be for everyone who ever stood on a bridge, or drove on a dark road, or sat awake at 3 in the morning wondering if staying was worth it. She looked toward the crowd, toward the edge where Eva stood. I don't know how to let go of being angry, she said, but I am willing to try something else, at least for tonight, to stand here and say if you're still here, yeah, you're not alone, even if you feel like you are. Especially then. She stepped back. The councilman returned to the microphone, clearing his throat. We'll start the lanterns now, he said. Tables lined the sides of the square, held stacks of paper lanterns and markers. People moved toward them slowly, as if approaching something sacred. Eva and Rosie joined the line. What do we write? Rosie asked, marker in hand. Eva thought of all the words she could put down. Names, dates, apologies, thank yous. She wrote 2 words on the side of their lantern. We stayed. Rosie added a small, wobbly heart. They lit the candle inside and carried it carefully to the fountain. The surface of the water was thinly frozen. A clear skin layered over movement. Volunteers had cleared a small channel where lanterns could float. Ready, Eva asked. Rosie nodded. Together, they set their lantern down. It wobbled, then steadied, joining the others in a slow, glowing procession. Good night, Miss Claire, Rosie whispered. Eva closed her eyes. Thank you, she thought. Not as debt, as recognition. When she opened them, Daniel was there. Not on stage, not across the square. On the stone path a few steps away, hat in his hands, snow in his hair. He looked tired and lighter at the same time. You came, he said. Yes, she replied. I tried not to. It didn't work. He huffed a small laugh. I read your letter, he said. I woke up to an empty guest house and a note that sounded like a goodbye you weren't quite ready to write. I didn't want to make a scene, she said. I thought if I slipped away, it would hurt less for everyone. It didn't, he said simply. Snow fell between them, gentle, indifferent. I meant what I said, he added, about not blaming you anymore, about the bridge, about everything. That doesn't mean Nora won't, Eva said. No, he agreed, but that's her work to do, not yours. They watched the lanterns together for a moment. I don't know what happens now, she said. I don't know where I fit, or if I do. You fit wherever you're standing, he said, whether that's in my guest house or a tiny apartment or the back row of a festival. You're not a ghost in Claire's story. You're a person in your own. Rosie returned, cookie in hand. cheeks flushed. Daniel, she said around crumbs. They have hot chocolate too, and a dog and a scarf. He smiled at her. We should probably see that, he said. Rosie took one of his hands and one of Eva's, linking them. Come on, she said. You two walk too slow. They let her pull them into the light. Daddy and Me Day smelled like floor polish and sugar. The school gym was full of paper rockets, poster paint, and children pointing proudly at grown-ups who mostly seemed baffled by craft instructions. Eva stood near the doorway, clutching the strap of her bag. We don't have to stay long, she told Rosie. You can show him your rocket and we can go. I want to stay, Rosie said. They have glitter and also snacks. She scanned the room. There, she said, hopping a little. Daniel stood near a table covered in colored paper and glue sticks, looking down at a sheet of instructions as if it were a complex legal document. He wore a shirt Rosie had once called his serious grown-up shirt. His scarf hung awkwardly from a coat thrown over a chair. He looked up when he felt eyes on him. Their gazes met across the noise. He smiled, not the polite, careful smile of the cemetery, not the brittle one from the hill. Something warmer, tentative, real. Rosie darted ahead, weaving between chairs, and flung herself at him. You came, she said. I promised, he replied. He ruffled her hair, then looked over her head at Eva, who had followed more slowly. Thank you for inviting me, he said. You're the one who did the hard part, she replied. Showing up. They spent the afternoon cutting, gluing, and laughing at rockets that refused to keep their fins attached. Daniel's fingers ended up covered in glitter. Rosie declared that proof he was official now. Later, when the gym emptied and parents collected backpacks and stray art projects, they walked out into the weak afternoon sun together. Rosie ran ahead to stomp through a pile of leftover snow. Eva and Daniel walked side by side. It feels strange, she said, doing something so normal. He nodded. It does. He agreed, but I think that's the point. They reached the edge of the parking lot. The festival committee wants to meet again next week, he said. They have new ideas. Actual mental health boosts this time. Nora's pushing them. She's good at pushing, Eva said. She's good at a lot of things, he replied. She just doesn't trust herself yet. He hesitated. The foundation would like to keep you on, he said. Past winter, not just temp. She looked at him. Are you sure that won't make everything messier, she asked. Everything is already messy, he said. You're good at what you do. You see things in those applications other people miss. That matters. She thought of Claire's sketchbook, of the way the pencil lines had tried to capture a girl slipping away. I'll think about it, she said. That's all I'm asking, he replied. They watched Rosie scoop snow into her hands and throw it into the air, shrieking as it came back down on her head. Do you ever feel like she's watching? Eva asked suddenly. Claire. He looked at the sky. Maybe, he said. If she is, I don't think she'd waste much time on whether we're getting it perfectly right. I think she'd be more interested in whether we're still showing up for people. Are we? Eva asked. He glanced at her, at Rosie, at the school. We're trying, he said. Some days that's enough. On the next year's first snow, the hill looked almost the same. The same stone, the same trees, the same path up from the road. But the people standing in front of Claire's grave were not the same as the ones who had stood there before. Eva stood on one side of the stone, gloved fingers resting lightly on the cold granite. Rosie stood in front, a little taller now, had a different color, still asking the sky questions. Daniel stood on the other side, hands in his coat pockets, shoulders less hunched than the year before. Nora stood slightly back, arms crossed, a jar in her hands. Snow fell on all of them. Ava knelt and placed their offering at the base of the stone. It was another glass jar. Inside, dried lavender. Taped around it, a new drawing. 4 stick figures this time, under a yellow circle. One with a dog beside it. Little labels above each head in Rosie's uneven handwriting. Mom, me, Daniel, Nora. Hi, Miss Claire, Rosie said softly. We made you an update. Nora snorted once, then shook her head. She'd say we're all being dramatic, she murmured. Then she'd cry later when no one was looking. Good thing we're looking now, Daniel said. They stood in silence for a while, hearing only the muffled world. Thank you, Eva whispered. Not to the stone, not just to Claire, to the bridge, to the storm, to the choices that had hurt and saved and tangled their lives into something they could stand in together now. Come on, Nora said after a while, sniffing. If we stay much longer, I'm going to start monologuing, and nobody wants that. They walked back down the path together. The town waited below, bills and meetings and festivals and quiet nights, bridges and roads and people who still, even now, sometimes stood on edges wondering if they should keep walking. The snow kept falling. The light stayed on,